All right. Hey, greetings, class. This is Professor David Rougely here. And, as I mentioned, I wanted to try to incorporate some cybersecurity industry engagement into the course here as we get ready to wrap up the semester. It is my pleasure and honor. It is an honor to have with me Jason Reed of RTB Technologies, who is here to engage with me and you. And welcome, Jason. I'm glad to have you here.
That's great to be here. Really appreciate the invite. This is cool.
Awesome, awesome. Well, let's jump right into it, Jason. Can you just kind of, my class is called Cyber Laws and Regulation, and there are a bunch of great students, jumping into this journey of cybersecurity or making some type of life transition. So, could you just kind of, tell us about yourself and about your career as a cybersecurity professional?
Yeah, it is indeed a journey for sure. So I'm Jason Reed. I'm the co-founder of RTB Technologies. We're based here out of Aurora. We provide outsourced IT, cybersecurity, and compliance to independent medical practices throughout the region. We're just now starting to expand past the Denver region and into what we call Mountain West. So we're really excited about that. Lots of great opportunities. And both myself and my co-founder are former Air Force cyber operations officers. So that's how we met. That journey has been a journey in and of itself. So I started off enlisted in the Air Force. I started taking night classes at the local community college just to learn about computers, right? This is probably early 2000s timeframe. Oh, and I started taking night classes there while I was still enlisted. And then that kind of opened some doors to the bachelor's degree through the local state university, and I ended up getting on a program to get my commission through there, and that was cool. And while I was doing that, I started working at the IT department at Valdosta State University. So kind of thrown into it. I started off, we'd split time between being help desk. So I'd answer the phone a couple of days a week, trying to solve problems for people over the phone. And then the other part was actually going out to professors' offices and fixing their computers. And that was really cool. That was my first IT job ever. And then ended up commissioning into the Air Force as a cyber operations officer, and did a variety of cool things. And that included running base comm is what we called it. So basically, the IT department for an Air Force base would be one way of looking at it. Did that, for basically, my career. There's a little bit of offshoots. Ended up also doing some work for the NSA here at Buckley, and that's where I met my co-founder, Zach. And we started discussing post-military plans. Like, okay, well, what do we want to do, with this knowledge? And there's lots of options, right? Especially as you start gaining some experience, but really what we wanted to do was see if we can take the skills that we learned, that the Air Force taught us, both in terms of cyberspace operations, but also leadership and customer service and all that. And we wanted to see if we could build a company around that. And that's essentially what RTB is we are a smaller version of an Air Force unit, that would provide, the IT and the cybersecurity and all that for buildings on the base. But instead of providing this for buildings on a base, we're providing it to other businesses that are spread out. Mm-hmm. And it's been really cool.
That's pretty good, man. Thank you for sharing that. And I like how you put it. You gave us that kind of that road map and journey that you took. And as we know in this field of cybersecurity, that the roads are many.
That's right. There is no one right path, for sure.
Right.
Lots of ways to get there.
Absolutely. There's lots of ways to get there. And then there are many different areas of where you can specialize within cybersecurity within itself, right? So appreciate you sharing the journey from the Air Force to meeting your co-founder and to where you are now. And you touched on RTB. So can you give us a little bit more background about RTB Technologies?
Yeah.
What is its official vision and mission? And you can also, I'm sure some of my students are prior military, so I'm sure
Okay.
they appreciate the name of how you came up with RTB and Technologies.
Yeah, for sure. So RTB is a shout out to our Air Force heritage, for sure. Stands for Return to Base. And the way we say return to base in the military is, after a successfully completed mission, RTB, let's go back. So that's where we got the name, and incorporated a little swirl of a B-2 aircraft in our logo, which represents the B-2 returning to base after a successfully completed mission. And it's been a long journey. Business does not happen fast, especially when you're thinking of it, growing it from the foundation on up. There's options for like buying franchises and things like that, which can make it a little bit easier, because they'll help provide you with tools and processes and things like that, marketing, all that other stuff that you need. Whereas if you're building a business from scratch, as you know, David, it requires a lot of work, because you got to do everything yourself and you got to build it from nothing. And so when we first started the idea for the business, we were thinking cybersecurity only. That's kind of what what the world needs, or what everybody assumes that the world needs, and they really do need it, but
Right.
not everybody can afford good stuff, and we'll get into all that stuff later. But kind of the story was, this was when we were working for the NSA, and they paid for a certified ethical hacking class for us. And Zach and I had kind of started just the initial thoughts of what are we going to do, and then as we were going through that CAH class, we were like, there might be something here that we can offer the outside world. And when we started doing a little bit more market research, one of the things that became clear to us was, a lot of businesses don't want to go to one place for that type of cybersecurity, and then someplace else for their traditional IT. Like my email's broken, that sort of thing. So we decided, that if that's where the business is, then that's how we were going to adjust. So that's how we started providing the traditional IT support, as well as the advanced cybersecurity that we offer.
Makes sense. So it's kind of a, would you say, I'm going to sidebar on that question. Would you say that it's a value add, or just a separate product altogether?
I would say value add, and we've had different iterations of this. I mean, if you're not constantly evolving and adjusting, then you're probably not going to survive very long. So it is constant reevaluation and figuring out what's needed.
Makes sense, man. Thank you for that particular answer. And I definitely know where you're coming from, and it's definitely tough to go out there and be a cyber evangelist, right? Cybersecurity evangelist, trying to get people to make sure that they're protecting themselves, as well as their enterprise systems, their electronic equipment, and you name it. So and you're right, things are constantly evolving. What is Bible this week? Next week it might change, So the threats are evolving, and then we're living in a time where things just continue to change. It's always something new. So with that said, I'm going to switch gears just a little bit and just kind of come towards where we are in society today. We got a lot of geopolitical things going on. And it's hard to discuss those things without talking about cyber terrorism. So when it comes to cyber terrorism, who do you believe is the biggest threat right now?
Yeah, well, it's interesting also that you use the word cyber terrorism, because oftentimes I'll use the word cyber crime, right? And so what exactly is the difference between cyber terrorism and cyber crime? Maybe not much, maybe a little, maybe it's the intention the people want? Are they wanting to, incite terror and fear, or are they wanting to profit, from ransomware? Maybe that's the difference. But with the everything that's going on in the world right now from a geopolitical perspective, I mean, how can you not say Russia is the biggest threat? So, it's April 2022 right now. Who knows what's going to happen in late April or May, right? But I think absolutely, when you think even cybercrime or cyber terrorism right now, that is Russia, because you read little clips and they're threatening, and they're backed into a corner, and there's nothing scarier than to try to account for a crazed animal who's backed into a corner. You never know what they're going to do. And Russia certainly has, some significant capabilities, but so do we, right? So
absolutely.
Yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, and I do, kind of wish, that I was still wearing the uniform a little bit, and I got to peek behind the scenes to, see what some of those conversations are, what they are right now, but I'm not wearing the uniform, and I no longer have a security clearance, and therefore a need to know. So, but I know that, there are some extremely smart people that are working through these problems right now.
Absolutely. You're definitely right about that. And it's interesting, but not interesting at the same time that you mentioned Russia. A lot of times when I'm having these discussions with folks, you try not to, you mention the usual suspects, right? It's Russia, North Korea, China, and that whole quote unquote, I don't know if we can say this anymore, but axis of evil, right?
Right.
And you don't want to keep repeating those names as if you're being stereotypical or something like that. But hey, these are the usual suspects, right? And when it comes to Russia, I mean, we can go back as far as 2010 in some cases, where we've had cyber incidents back and forth that led to probably what we would call an ongoing cyber warfare. And depending on some experts you talk to, it's just a different version of the Cold War. So we've been at this for quite some time, and so I appreciate your insight there. And the way I see it, I'm glad you're where you are. And I'm appreciative that you have been in the uniform, but I also believe that we need all hands on deck. We need all hands on deck.
That's a fact, yeah, and it's not just within the government sector. You're absolutely right.
That's it. That's correct. And so still, we're still talking about cyber terrorism just a little bit, and you gave me the biggest threat. But which industries or sectors do you believe are the most vulnerable?
Yeah. So definitely, I would say, with regard to the terror aspect that Russia is currently bringing to the table, that has to perfectly align with critical infrastructure, right? Because that's really where we're concerned. I do want to make a point to something kind of related before, and we were talking about all the actors and everything.
Sure.
You mentioned North Korea, like they're never out of it. But one of the things that made North Korea really dangerous is when the U.S. and large other nation states put a bunch of sanctions on them, right? So when you have a highly sanctioned state like North Korea, and it's looking like Russia is being highly sanctioned also, what ended up happening with North Korea is that now, from a state-sponsored perspective, they're looking for other avenues of revenue generation, right? So, I mean, North Korea is never going to admit to that, right? Like, we're sponsoring, state-sponsored, ransomware activities and things like that. But that is one of the reasons for the increased level of sophistication, right? And it was also to help the government in terms of revenue generation. So how that applies to Russia, I don't know yet, but it's kind of a scary prospect to think about, right? Because if they're not generating revenue by other means because of the sanctions against them, what else are they capable of? and then, take away the state sponsored, right? You mentioned the state sponsored.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's criminal organizations now that are becoming, more and more powerful. Talking about cybercrime, if you were to take the amount of money that has been generated by cybercrime, and I'm not talking about state sponsored, just cybercrime in general,
Mm-hmm.
it would be the 13th largest GDP in the world. So really, we're not talking about cybercrime as a business. It's really more cybercrime as an economy.
Mm-hmm.
So that also is a really scary aspect, right? So there's very smart people that are committing cybercrime right now, and how are they going to utilize the geopolitical atmosphere of what's going on with Russia? Are they, can they maybe mask or obfuscate some of their activities? I don't know,
Right.
exactly, but I do know that there's a lot of different threats out there.
Right. And that's a good segue into the next question that I had for you. We talk about cybercrime and the threats that stem from them. We have these crime syndicates, right? Now that has this whole other industry with the GDP number, with the GDP figure that you just mentioned, right? So how, with all that said, right, what cyber threat gives you the most cause for concern? Like, and not saying that something keeps you up at night, but if something did keep you up at night, what would it be?
Yeah, I mean, the answer number one is critical infrastructure. If our, electric, water, communications, if that gets taken down, look what the pandemic did to us from a panic perspective, right? Who knows how long it could be down for, or how people are going to react to that. So that's thing number one. And then thing number two that keeps me up at night is a little more personal, right? Because it hits home a little bit more. And that's, from a business perspective, is my business adequately taking care of our clients? Are we accounting for everything? Are we tracking the unknowns? And that's really the scariest part about cybersecurity, is what you can't account for and what you don't know.
Right, absolutely. Because there's never, we always say, right, in this field, that there's never 100% mitigation, right?
Unless you just leave it in the box.
Right. Yeah, you leave it in the box. Now we try, but there's
Yeah.
never going to be 100% mitigation. And so yeah, that's a really interesting perspective, and thank you for sharing that again. And so speaking about the business aspect of things, and just this, cybersecurity operations in general. Recently we covered the topic of cybersecurity operations in our class, and how there's sometimes engagement with law enforcement operations, or there can be some type of overlap. Can you recall a time where an incident occurred and you had to get law enforcement involved at all?
We have been fortunate enough to not have to go through that yet. We try really hard at prevention and documentation and things like that, but like you said, that's never 100%. So you need to have an incident response plan, so you know what to do when it happens.
Right.
And then also regarding just getting the authorities involved in forensics. Chain of custody is huge, right? Like, there's a very specific way that you need to track everything that happens, just from from insurance perspective, from legal perspective, chain of custody and forensics. All that stuff is really important. So it's really important to have a good incident response plan.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting you brought up incident response. I was talking to some colleagues last week and they landed another company from an MSP perspective. It was an IR, incident response company, and this particular company were having 10,000 incidents per day. That is a lot of activity, and to be a fly on the wall in some of those conversations as they get onboarded would be definitely a privilege. But so with that said, right, and thankfully, and hopefully you never have to get involved with law enforcement operation, you
That's the
know.
idea. That's
Yeah,
that's why you maintain high standards of security,
yeah,
right? I mean,
absolutely.
if your standards are low, you're going to be dealing with incident response a lot more often than you would be if you have higher standards.
Absolutely, absolutely. So it's understood that, I think we've established that you're a cybersecurity expert. But earlier you mentioned, as you were describing RTB Technologies to us, you mentioned that you have a niche into, HIPAA compliance. And can you tell us what that is and
Yeah,
why it's so important?
right. So HIPAA deals with medical only, protected health information. So anytime you have compliance, compliance is set by a third party, usually a government that businesses have to adhere to. And depending on who sets the compliance and what the teeth are for enforcement, that's going to dictate the level by which you follow it. HIPAA has some pretty significant teeth right now. The average fine for a HIPAA violation is $1.5 million. And yeah, so it's a really big deal. It's been around, HIPAA's been around for quite some time. There's been different iterations of it, starting in the early 2000s. And then in the early 2010s, there was another iteration, the omnibus rule. But it wasn't until about 2016 that it really started to get teeth. And it's within the government, the Department of Health and Human Services. They oversee it, and then specifically within that, it's the Office of Civil Rights.
Hmm.
They're the ones who have been tasked with overseeing HIPAA. And in 2016, they basically were starting to get really tired of people not listening to them. People just kind of brushing it off and saying, yeah, we're not really going to conform to HIPAA right now because resources or whatever. So that's when they decided that they were going to switch from being a compliance arm to that of enforcement. And they knew that to really be taken seriously, they needed to make examples of people. And so that's what they're doing with the hefty fines. And right now, businesses who have undergone a HIPAA audit, 94% of them are failing.
Wow.
So
94%?
94% have failed the HIPAA audit. And that's
Wow.
simply because they don't know how to document. Documentation is everything. Hopefully, you guys are probably touching on that from a cyber security and especially legal perspective. If you're not
Absolutely.
documented, it doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
But so that's one aspect of it, right? And then the reason why we got involved with it is when we took on our first HIPAA client, that law that I told you about in 2012, the omnibus rule. What that rule put into place is that if you are a business associate of a HIPAA covered entity, the covered entity would be the private practice, the medical office, the doctors. If you're a vendor who does business with them and you're a business associate, then you are bound by those exact same mandates. So whenever we took on a HIPAA client, we became mandated by HIPAA just like they did. So for that reason, and if we're going to, go through the work of documentation and making sure that we're HIPAA compliant, for one, that kind of makes sense to us, with our backgrounds in the Air Force, because HIPAA compliance it's all about high standards of data protection, protected health information in this instance. The Air Force, and we're talking about, classified versus unclassified data, very similar controls, right? So it just made sense to us. So for those two reasons, our background combined with the fact that we had to be mandated by it, we decided maybe there's a niche here. And that's one of the things that we've learned in business also, is that it's better to be a specialist than it is to be a generalist.
Now you talked about, protected data and the whole, in the healthcare atmosphere, but also when you were in the Air Force, protecting, controlled unclassified information to classified information and things like that, right? So all roads lead back to data. So do you believe that in the phrase that data is the new oil, and is it still relevant for today?
Absolutely, is still relevant. Yeah, I mean, there's, you know, billions and billions of dollars that are, you know, swapped hands, not only for the protection of data, but, you know, the criminal organizations who are after the data, who try to steal the data, encrypt the data, hold it for ransom.
Right.
So absolutely, it is all about the data. But that's why critical infrastructure is so interesting and scary, because you know, unless they're you know, trying to take something down to hold it for ransom, I mean, you know, that's going to hurt people. You know, taking down the critical infrastructure could definitely, you know, start going into the realm of endangering lives, right? So it's scary no matter how you look at it, for sure.
Absolutely. That's true. You know, so as we I got two more questions for you, you know, as we come towards the end here. I know time is money, you know, so I know,
Hmm.
and time is valuable, and I want you to get back out there to definitely providing the expert service that you provide. In our last chapter in the course text, you know, it's titled "What the Future Holds," and I know we don't have a crystal ball or anything, but you know, it covers that chapter covers several topics, and one is over emerging threats in the future. So, in your expert opinion, what do you see as an emerging threat in our hyperconnected world?
Well, I can tell you that one of the things that we're seeing right now from a business perspective, cyber insurance is
Mm.
going to be harder to come by. And that's because there's so much going on in the cyber world right now. You know, we talk about the ransomware and the cyber crime as an economy,
Mhm.
right? And insurance companies are bearing the brunt of a lot of, you know, this financial pain. That's been kind of an evolution, you know, as you know, when ransomware first started taking hold, what a lot of businesses were doing was they were transferring that risk to an insurance company and saying, well, I don't really have to worry too much about, you know, advanced cybersecurity because I got ransomware insurance,
Mhm.
right? But that math only works out for a short period of time until the insurance companies really start losing a lot of money. And then a couple different things are going to happen. And that's what we're seeing now. One, the standards are being raised by which, you know, the insurance companies um, make their clients do their due diligence, right? You need to have certain standards of cybersecurity in place in order to potentially have a claim paid out. Um, but also other insurance companies are just opting out. They're getting out of the cyber insurance game altogether. And that's one of the things that's really scary right now, is because it's kind of the Wild West right now, and there's, you know, insurance is built on math
Right.
and formulas, right?
Yeah.
So they know, like, per, you know, X and Y, and they know what the factors are and how often something is bound to happen. But all that goes out the window when you're talking about cybercrime and cyber terrorism and claims, and it's really insane. So that's one of the things that I see happening.
Mhm.
But with that, you know, I mean, it's there. It really is just going to be the Wild West right now, and I'm very happy to be sitting behind some advanced cybersecurity as we speak. I recommend it for everybody.
I understand that. You know, I too am happy that I'm sitting behind some advanced cybersecurity as well.
Yeah,
And you know, thank you for that particular answer as well, because you know, and me and you may have even had this conversation once. You know, I'm starting to see. I didn't know that was going to be your answer. So this wasn't a staged
right.
question and response, but you know, out here on the, you know, as someone that sells, you know, multi-factor authentication products, you know, that's a big one that's definitely been uh, uh, exponentially growing for me, because of that cyber risk insurance that you mentioned, you know, and you're right. I you know, almost 4 or 5 times a week, you know, I'm in a conversation about cyber risk insurance, And it's usually because somebody cyber provider is pressing them to get this or have the standards in place, like you mentioned, or they're going to drop them. And some I've already met that they've been dropped, and
Really
not
bad.
just the cyber insurance, but the whole P&C. They dropped the whole property and casualty along with the risk insurance. And I'm like, wow, I didn't even know you could do that. But
And I would
apparently,
imagine that it's going to be really hard for them to acquire cyber insurance again, because
exactly.
that's one of the factors that insurance companies will use to choose who their clients are going to be. And a lot of times, especially now when it's the Wild West and they don't have their theories in place, if they were dropped by another company, it's going to be very difficult for any other company to want to pick them up.
Absolutely, you're right, and it's interesting. I got a referral of a company. A colleague of mine was dealing with a company. They wanted to put them to work on something, but that particular piece wasn't shored up like it needed to be. And they asked me, and I was like, I need to find you somebody, and it speaks just to what you're saying. It's the wild, wild west, and they're having a tough time getting cyber risk insurance. So that's an interesting topic, and I'm sure we'll be talking about it as the future
Oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah. You and I will definitely be talking about this.
it comes up.
Yeah.
So before I go and before we conclude this session, I really want to thank you for taking the time to speak to my cyber law and regulations course here at Metro State University, and just kind of allowing me and us to show them what it's like out here in the real world, right? Sometimes
Hmm.
the textbook stuff doesn't add up, and sometimes it does. It just provides that foundation. So I really appreciate you being here and doing this. So with that said, do you have any well, before I say that, like my class, they have diverse backgrounds. Many have gotten out the military and are transitioning. Some of my class students are non-traditional students making career advancements and career changes, and some of them are freshmen straight out of high school. So do you have any career advice, any book suggestions, movie suggestions, life
Yeah,
lessons that
absolutely,
you can
absolutely.
share?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. So gain as much experience as possible. You know, that's experience is more important than education. You want the education piece, and you certainly want the certification piece, but you really need experience. So with the experience, I mean, that's really going to open some doors for you and diversify that experience. The more diverse your background is, the better off you're going to be. And then that specialization aspect that I was talking about. And then as you diversify your experience and you find something that you want to either specialize in or find a niche, that's where you could really start branding yourself as somebody who is a specialist in whatever niche. And that's really going to open up some valuable doors for you as well. Um, set you apart from other technicians, right? Because in this day and age, what you want is you want to be able to be set apart than from the crowd. So do that and read a lot. I just read something interesting that said people who read 7 business books per year are going to make 2.3 times more than people who don't, right? And that's, yeah, that was cool. And I'm actually reading this right now, Think and Grow Rich. So this book was written in 1937.
mhm.
And this is the book by which, all these self-help books, a lot of them reference this book as an inspiration to them. And what's interesting about this one is that the dude who wrote it, Napoleon Hill, he was actually brought on by Andrew Carnegie, who was one of the titans of industry in the early 2000 or early 1900s in the steel industry. And him and a bunch of other titans of industry, basically, they knew this guy, Napoleon Hill, and told him, hey, you need to sit down with us and, tap into our brains, because we have a lot of wealth of information that, can get people to think and grow rich. And what I like about this book the most is that it's all about visualization of your mind, how to get your mind right and in the right place to accomplish your goals, no matter what those goals are. And that's what's really interesting about this book. I like it. It's a good read. And I ordered the follow-on book to this that's coming soon, and that's called Cyberstorm. And Cyberstorm is basically, it sounds like it's going to talk about the crap storm that's coming our way in this industry with everything that's happening. I mean, it's a very interesting time to be in our industry for sure. So that's why you want to gain a lot of experience where you can, to make you hireable for whatever it is. But beyond that, never stop learning. You can never know enough in this field. This field is an inch deep and a mile wide, is the way I've always heard it explained. But there's also enough specialty where you could drill down, way beyond an inch. So it really just depends on what interests you. So take that into consideration and take risks. You got to take risks that are going to put you outside your comfort zone. If you're comfortable, that means you're not growing. The only way that you're going to grow is if you're uncomfortable. And finally, do good things in this world. Influence the karma, right? I heard that recently too. I love it. Influence the karma. Put your work, your knowledge, to good. Put it, use it for the good of the many. Influence the karma, and you'll go a long ways.
Awesome.
But this has been great, David. Appreciate
Awesome.
the invite.
Yeah, thank you. Influence the karma. I'm taking notes myself here. I appreciate that. And Jason Reed, RTB Technologies, everybody, there you have it. Wonderful, wonderful interview. Thank you for the nuggets of wisdom. We appreciate you, and hopefully we get to do this again sometime.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, David, and good luck to the class.
Hey,
Appreciate
thank you.
Guys go out there and do great things.
Yes, sir. Thank you, and have a great time.
All right. Bye now.
Bye now.